Trump is failing and the resistance is winning.
We're in downtown Phoenix. Trumpers, you need to understand, this is a war on the poor. You're part of that. Trump only cares about his billionaire buddies. He does not give a shit about you. He will take your rights away when he's done taking the rights away of all the immigrants who built this country.
We have to consolidate a new independent leadership for this movement before some of the old misleaders are able to step in and use their fame and fortune and extraordinarily bad politics to co-opt the movement that's forming. That is our task. We need BAM's leadership and all the new BAM members, and they are plentiful. They don't even know they're new BAM members. They didn't even know, in many cases, that BAM exists now. But they have to know that. We have to get out our politics, and we have to consolidate and build as one collective leadership of this new movement using BAM's methods of struggle and conceptions of how to fight and win by any means necessary to succeed.
On February 1st, 2025, Shanta Driver, National Chair of BAM, the Coalition to Defend Affirmative Action, Integration and Immigrant Rights, and Fight for Equality by Any Means Necessary, gave a report on the state of Donald Trump's effort to create a fascist authoritarian regime, the growing resistance to Trump, and the need to consolidate the leaders of this new movement and to build BAM to win. Contact BAM now if you are a leader in this movement or want to become one.
What I'd like to do is focus my report on kind of the dynamics of what has been taking place thus far. And I'll probably mention a couple of specific events that have taken place. But I think that we definitely should have a separate discussion apart from my report on what is happening in different places and how we can relate to that. So I hope that will work out okay for people. So what I'd like to start with, though, well, no, I'm actually not going to start there, sorry. So I want to talk first about the dynamics of building a movement and then more on the idiocy of Trump's initiatives. We all know how racist they are. We all know that, or we should know by now, that he's trying to create a fascist America that is based less on what most fascist governments, that is to say, if you compare what Trump is doing to what Mussolini and Hitler did, what is distinctly different thus far about what Trump is doing is that he's less focused and really doing some like incredibly stupid things to consolidate the various state and federal and local police organizations into being directly under his command and capable of carrying out his policy of building an authoritarian fascist United States. And he's more focused on his rabid racism and anti-immigrant bigotry, which is what many of his supporters subscribe to and like most about him. But in the end, if you are building a fascist government, you really can't be in the position of splitting local and state and federal police, splitting parts of those in any case against you. That is like a super stupid thing to do. And so I'll come back to that in a minute. But what Trump has been absolutely obsessed about and trying to promote and advertise and use the media and his lies to claim he is successfully doing is arresting and deporting thousands of people. And what I want to say to begin, well, I've already begun. So the first point I want to make is that Trump is failing and the resistance is winning. And that would not seem apparent to most people who just watch regular news coverage or read the New York Times or watch MSNBC or CNN or rely on the supposedly liberal press to figure out what is going on with Trump's initiative to commit ethnic cleansing in the United States through this project of mass deportations. And the reason why you wouldn't know that this is happening is because, first and foremost, the Democratic Party leaders have done nothing to organize any kind of resistance at all to Trump. I mean, they are continuing to support Trump's different initiatives. They began his second term in office by voting for the Lincoln-Riley bill, which is mostly or greatly unconstitutional and has been challenged already in court, but also was one of the most vicious anti-immigrant bills ever presented to the U.S. Congress. And the only thing that I can think of that is comparable to that was the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II in concentration camps, which was also obviously illegal, but it didn't matter at that point because Roosevelt had whipped up so much anti-Japanese sentiment for the U.S. war drive, and was going to carry that out because he could declare an emergency, and that was supposed to justify this blatantly cruel and disgusting policy of racist arrests and detainment of people from Japan, and that flowed over into some people from China ending up in those camps and from Korea. So just a general, in that case, an attack against people whose families or they themselves had come from Japan or other places in Asia. And this is the Democrats to sign on to something like this. Obviously, it's not unprecedented. They did during World War II, but that was very different from this initiative by Trump, which really is to move quickly into a period of creating large concentration camp style detention centers, and for, as I said, trying to instituting a project of ethnic cleansing in America. Now, right from the beginning, it's been clear that Trump's initiative really, if he was trying to carry it out, it could only lead to civil war in the United States. And before he was ever, before his inauguration, BAM had predicted that there would be resistance to him. And we predicted that this resistance would start to build right from the beginning, right from the first moments of the Trump presidency, and that the building of this resistance would occur even if the Democrats were telling everyone to stay home, hide in bed, be scared, do nothing, go along with Trump, support their peaceful transition of power for Trump to come in project, which the Democrats have held fast to, but has not resulted in the suppression of struggle against Trump and the growth of a mass resistance movement that BAM had predicted would happen and is happening. What I'd like to start with then is talking about kind of the dynamics of how this is happening, because I've been trying to write something, a flyer for us describing what's been going on. And that's been really difficult to complete because every single day there are new, larger scaled, more successful demonstrations against Trump. And there's a deeper spreading understanding by us and all of the people involved in the resistance of how to carry out a strategy that can win. The first model, which the Biden administration inadvertently and certainly was not attempting to provide for us to learn from, was what Biden did in Bakersfield, California, because starting about 2 weeks before the inauguration, Biden, wanting to show that the Democrats could be just as racist, just as anti-immigrant, just as hell-bent on carrying out this policy of deporting people who live in the United States, who have every right to be here, and who it frankly it does not matter at all whether or not they have papers. If they've chosen to be Americans, they are Americans. And we know that the 11 million people that Trump is going after who are undocumented have every right to stay in America, to live in America as anybody else in this country. To say the obvious, this is a country of immigrants, of people who have declared their desire to be an American simply by showing up here for almost all of American history. And that is what the Trump administration is now trying to prevent from happening. Well, Biden opened the door to a very public attempt at mass deportations in Bakersfield, California. And it started with Border Patrol arriving in Bakersfield and hanging out at a gas station and a restaurant where they knew that the farm workers in Bakersfield, which Bakersfield's main claim to fame is that it's a place in which citrus fruits, including different types of tangerines and oranges and tangelos or whatever they're called, grow. And so it's had a large farm worker population forever. And so the Border Patrol started hanging out at places that they knew that farm workers would eat at or get gas at, going to or from the fields for work. And pretty quickly on, local people started calling and waving away people that they knew who were coming to their little businesses to not show up because ICE was there or ICE would be back there again. And of course, just as quickly and even more effectively in terms of stopping the raids, the farm workers themselves started spreading the word. Don't go to work. Don't leave your home. Don't do anything that might make you susceptible to being picked up by Border Patrol, who was picking up people just indiscriminately. They didn't know anybody who they thought was Latino, they picked up. They didn't care. They didn't ask to see people's papers. They didn't care what their status was. They just were randomly picking up people. And by day 3 of the Border Patrol attack, 75% of the farm workers were not going to work. They were staying at home. And that meant that Border Patrol / ICE, whatever we want to call them, could not do what they had hoped to do, which was to count on the cooperation of the growers, of the agribusinesses, to be able to pick up large numbers of concentrated farm workers, that is, large numbers of farm workers concentrated in a single place that would be picked up all at once so that Border Patrol didn't have to go door to door and neighborhood to neighborhood to do these arrests, which are always easier if they can be done in a public setting, at least up till now, in a public setting where it's possible to grab a bunch of people all at once. And the growers who would have participated with Border Patrol if the movement wasn't building and there wasn't action taking place by the farm workers themselves and by people in the community who followed up their calling people and stopping people from coming into businesses with a few days once Border Patrol was into what they were doing, which led to Bakersfield declaring itself again to be a sanctuary city. It led to local people and youth from the area mobilizing and demonstrating and blocking exit and entry points of Border Patrol into Bakersfield. And at the end of this, multi-day, in quotes, mass raid, they were about 80 people that were picked up, 40 of whom were released immediately. And there's stuff on social media saying that all of the rest of the people have been released at this point. So that combination of small and big actions provided a model for how to fight. There was a woman in Bakersfield who ICE pulled over, who simply refused to get out of her car, to unlock the door, to do what they were telling her to do. And that made it possible for people from the community to come to where she was at, because she had been able to get the word out and drive ICE away. And so I think that also provided an example of how to create worker community, student youth defense guards that could be successful if it was possible to provide people with real-time information about what was taking place. We now know that there are young people in particular organizing on TikTok using different types of names so they don't get shut down, like ice cream truck is with ICE capitalized, ICE capitalized, here or there. And again, providing real-time information about where ICE is patrolling, and in some cases, providing real-time information about where ICE is conducting an actual raid so that it's possible to get people to that site to protect the people that are ICE is trying to pick up. And just that kind of networking has been so very successful at helping to build the movement. When Trump was inaugurated, the day after, when everybody was just bracing for what looked like would be an onslaught of arrests, what took place was far less than what was advertised. And starting with just a single principal in Chicago who threw out a federal police person who claimed to be social service, who claimed to be not ICE, let me put it that way, but almost certainly was ICE, and not Secret Service, which is what he was claiming to be. That one principal got rid of and stopped an ICE raid in his school. And that process of schools starting to become real sites of resistance has spread so much, and there's been so much pressure, including in places like Detroit, from Detroit's Black community, to do everything to prevent this ethnic cleansing from going forward, that the Detroit School District, which had declared on January 14th that it was not going to be a sanctuary school district, by a week and a half later was saying that it was going to lead Michigan schools in sanctuary school efforts and programs and training and whatnot, which, you know, we don't know how much of that is really happening. But the fact that it took only a tiny amount of time and some pressure, real pressure for the Detroit school district to respond to turn into a sanctuary school district from not a sanctuary school district was really important. And to put this in a bigger context, the mayor of Detroit, Duggan, has become an independent and is no longer a Democrat, and has been swearing up and down that Detroit will not be a sanctuary city. But when ICE called on the Detroit police to help them when they were facing a lot of uproar in Southwest Detroit, which is an overwhelmingly immigrant majority Latino community, the Detroit police refused to help. And I think that made clear to the school district that they better follow suit, or certainly the superintendent of the district, Nikolai Vitti, who is hated in Detroit, would be looking at being booted out, as is likely to happen now with the mayor of Detroit, unless he changes his position. So we saw from that first small stand that was taken, which proved that you can do a lot just as a single individual. In Chicago, that one principal showed that. There's been now just across the country, more and more school districts stating that they will become, that they are and will direct efforts within each separate school to provide resistance to the Trump policy of trying to have ICE officers outside of schools to pick up children and parents, again, in what they prefer, which is a public setting of concentrated population to pick up. Okay, so that was good. And but there was also bubbling and building in communities, demonstrations and marches that were beginning and were really each one inspiring more and more people to act. And I want to give just one more example of what the ways in which resistance can take place and grow and transform some of the most unlikely places into centers now of resistance. So on January 26th, there was a march in two places in Texas, Dallas and El Paso, that was organized in a day through social media with no big name organizers. And it was organized by people who were emerging new leaders of the resistance movement, but probably didn't see themselves as that at the time that they were putting out the word for people from the very large communities of people of Mexican descent to turn out in Dallas and in El Paso to and to bring Mexican flags, to make homemade signs, to just openly display their pride in Mexican heritage and Mexico itself. And there were people who that demonstration, one of the first of its kind, was about 1,000 people. But the people who showed up, a lot of people said they had no idea whether anyone else was going to come or not. All they knew was they had to be out there. They had to make their signs. They had to bring their flags. They had to be ready if all that could be done would be to line people with signs on one of the two busy roads of Dallas or El Paso, because they were just going to fight. And they weren't waiting to see whether somebody else was going to be there. They really wanted to oppose the fear and the sense of vast vulnerability of people within their communities. And so they came out, and it turned into two really good size events that, again, you wouldn't have seen probably on any national news source, but there were some videos that started being posted on social media. And that phenomena is like, which I hope we will be able to watch a couple of videos, has just grown and grown. Every day it's growing, and it will keep growing. And just as the demonstrations in Bakersfield showed that you didn't need 1 million people, you could have some hundreds and make a huge difference. Those two demonstrations made clear that you could have more than a few hundred if you called an action, but also you could inspire far larger demonstrations in other places just by acting and by rejecting the fear mongering and the chest thumping of Donald Trump and his ICE agents. So I think one of the least likely places for there to end up as a center of resistance has been the state of Arizona. And Arizona has always led, for the last several years, has led all states in America in carrying out deportations. It was one of the first states to pass really severe anti-immigration state laws, and it was made famous by one of the sheriffs in the Phoenix area, Sheriff Joe, who was pardoned by Donald Trump in his first term as president for being the racist sheriff who carried out his own deportations. I have his name right. I didn't look at that before this.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that's Arizona. But as soon as the Trump presidency began, and this is kind of typical of Trump. Yeah, thank you, Joe Arpaio. Sorry. One of the first things that happened was that the sheriff of Pima County, Arizona, just said, I'm not cooperating with ICE. First of all, they don't do a damn thing anyway. And so I don't see why I should have to do their job. They should do their job and I'll do my job. And but I see no reason to assign any of our sheriffs to be involved in deportation. And at the same time, the governor of Arizona vetoed another state bill in Arizona that was completely, lavishing as much support on the Trump policies as a state possibly could. And at first, that was unpopular, but when Trump cut off, made that momentary cutoff of all aid, of all different kinds of aid, $3 trillion of aid to states and schools and research centers and all sorts of places. The governor went public calling that bullshit and talking about why she was opposed to Trump. And her stand became much more popular in Arizona because it was obvious that Trump was carrying out policies that would harm the, retirees and the upper middle class and whatnot, really rich people in the state. And then that was followed by South Tucson, which is a little teeny town surrounded by Tucson proper, to declare that it was going to be and remain a sanctuary city. And then that spread to more places declaring that they would not cooperate with ICE. And then finally, just a couple of days ago, now all of this is, this is such a compressed period of time since the inauguration that it's hard to, keep track of the fact that all of this has happened so quickly. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks since the inauguration. But that was followed then by one really big march in Phoenix, modeled on what was done in Dallas and El Paso. And people, again, loud, proud, wearing Mexican flags, carrying their signs of saying, we will win if we stand together and things like that, and expressing their hate for Trump. And then another march in Tucson. And it's I think that those dynamics of just starting somewhere, starting small, but then using both the confidence that people are gaining from what they're seeing happening in the rest of the country, combined with an understanding by immigrant communities of their growing power and their and the balance of power favoring them in many places, favoring those now leaders of the resistance, is just spawned, changed the whole character of places. And I think if you had asked somebody 2 weeks today, the day before the or 2 weeks, 2 days before the inauguration, when the big march occurred in Washington on January 18th in opposition to Trump, would they have thought that Arizona would be becoming a radical hotbed of resistance to Trump? I don't think anybody would have bet on that if we were, in one of those gambling sites and we said that. We probably could have made a lot of money. Of course, we probably wouldn't have bet on it ourselves. So it's just those kinds of developments that are taking place. And what is missing? What is currently present is the fact that these are independent movements that are forming. These are not places in which the old sellout leaders of the past immigration movements and struggles have been able to have come to the fore, can easily shut things down now. That is not the case. These are independent actions by people who already have rejected the leadership of the past leaders who never provided the kind of leadership that was needed to win so much more that could have been won, but was not won because everybody's focus was redirected to electoral politics, which obviously completely failed. And it failed first with the Democrats who, shamelessly and brazenly participated in the ethnic cleansing of Gaza and of the Holocaust that has been committed against the Palestinian people. The acts of genocide that the U.S. has supported, has facilitated in Gaza and other places, and that continue to this day, were initiated by the Democrats. And so the Democrats couldn't win the last presidential election because they had cut off their ties to their actual base and to in particular, the left wing of the Democratic Party. And then, we have Trump, who has been outspoken, self-declared, Hitler-loving fascist from the start of his election campaign and even before that, but has been treated as like one more like really right-wing Republican by the Democrats, who have normalized fascism and his fascist agenda by treating it as just one more policy of an unpopular right-wing president, rather than a declaration of his intention to follow in Hitler's image and Mussolini's image, and try to become the fascist dictator of the United States. And that was so borne out if you listen to his inauguration speech, where he declared that he was creating I'm sorry, I get distracted sometimes when things come up on the chat. Anyway, he declared he was going to create the golden age of America, returning America to being a white nationalist country, taking every step he could to make sure he attacked not only immigrant communities, but also ended diversity programs, started attacking women's rights, all of those things. It's so clear that that Trump was taking a page out of Hitler's playbook, in which Hitler, when he ascended to power in Germany, declared he was going to build the Third Reich, the third great German empire that would be able to last 1,000 years. And that was absolutely what Trump was imitating and saying he was going to build the new golden age in America. But obviously, we've been able to use this moment to build an opposition that is currently independent and youth-led and led by the immigrant and Black communities in particular, and is just gaining momentum. But there, on this topic, I'm going to talk about one other thing before I move on. On this particular part of the report, the main thing is we have to consolidate a new independent leadership for this movement before some of the old misleaders are able to step in and use their fame and fortune and extraordinarily bad politics to co-opt the movement that's forming. That is our task. We need BAM's leadership and all the new BAM members, and they are plentiful. They don't even know they're new BAM members. They didn't even know, in many cases, that BAM exists now. But they have to know that. We have to get out our politics, and we have to consolidate and build as one collective leadership of this new movement using BAM's methods of struggle and conceptions of how to fight and win by any means necessary to succeed. Otherwise, we could see the gains that we've made evaporate because all of a sudden there are leaders that are emerging that have no reason to exist other than killing this new independent movement. That happened with George Floyd. It will happen with this unless we can raise the profile of BAM and make clear to people that what they are doing, which seem like really simple, really obvious things to them, are far more powerful and are exactly what's needed, but would never take place, would never be encouraged, would never be allowed, would be suppressed one way or another if the misleaders of all of our movements of the last 10 years were able to prevail and longer than 10 years, were able to re-enter into the struggle for the sole purpose of killing it. Okay, so I said we were winning. The resistance was winning. And you might say, well, what you've said so far would convince anybody that a resistance is growing, but how do we address the fact that the Trump movement is saying that it's picking up more than 1,000 people a day now that it's really gotten going, and that it's arrested 5,500 plus people. It's right, 7,000 or so now. And those are figures that are coming from Homeland Security. And I'm sure they're exaggerated, but they're not that exaggerated, I would guess. And the first thing to know about those figures is that all ICE is reporting is how many people they're arresting. They're not reporting how many people they're releasing. They're not addressing the question of how many of those people have actually been deported. They're not providing figures on how many of the people they arrested have a legal right to stay in the United States because they have some kind of status that allows them to be here. So we don't know what the true figures are. What we know is of the people that have been captured, the great majority of those people are in detention centers, and a whole number of them will probably be able to gain some kind of release from the detention centers because there haven't been enough changes in the basics of immigration law to stop people from utilizing the due process rights they still have to be able to get out of detention. And if they're not able to do that, to make a case for why they should be granted the right to stay in America through immigration court proceedings. So there isn't a lot that Trump has accomplished on that front as of this point, and by citing arrest figures, but not providing figures on detentions or on deportations, the numbers sound far greater than what they are meant to present that Trump has achieved. The other two things, though, that I want to say on why the movement is winning is despite all of the hoopla and all of the images that we've seen of people being handcuffed and shackled, being walked into a military plane. As of this point, it seems from people who can predict these things or provide information on them, not predict, but be able to look at the data and figure out what's going on, that there've been about 3 or 4 military flights that have actually taken place. And 2 of those flights were flights to Colombia of about 100 people each. And the Colombian government refused to allow those flights to land in Colombia. and this is going to be true throughout Latin America, that governments are not going to agree to have U.S. military planes or presence publicly on display in their countries. It's an excellent way for those governments, the governments of different Central American and Latin American countries, to end up with riots in their streets. So that's a no-go to them. And like so much of Trump's ignorance and arrogance and just pure, unadulterated stupidity and narcissism, Trump thought he could get away with using these military carriers. And they've been, it costs about $1 million a flight. They're hugely expensive, some cases 10 times more expensive than using an ICE aircraft or a private charter plane. But Trump has wanted to use those military planes to create an image in America that he has drawn in the full force of the U.S. military to be involved in his deportation efforts, because that's what he promised his base he would do. So the 2 flights that went to Colombia were turned back, and the people were placed in detention here when the flights returned, and they got out information about how terribly they were treated on those flights, that they were shackled to their chairs, and Trump responded to the inability of the military aircraft to land in Colombia by, doing a lot of blustering and claiming he was going to impose 50% tariffs on Colombian goods, blah, 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 is ordinary bullshit, to quote the governor of Arizona. And so what ended up happening was Colombia won on this. There can be no military planes that are sent to Colombia. And Colombia, in fact, sent one of its own planes to the United States to, in quotes, free the Colombian captives of ICE from their being placed in detention, and return the people to Colombia, making clear that not a single one of those people had ever been convicted of a criminal offense in either the United States or Colombia. And while that is not a defeat in terms of stopping those people from being returned, it was definitely a defeat to the Trump, information propaganda efforts. Another one of the Trump flights that took off and went to Brazil was a charter plane that was so in need of service that it could barely take off, and ended up landing in a town in the Amazon in Brazil because it had to make a landing very suddenly because of mechanical failure. And on that flight, now this is really kind of super duper crazy. After the plane landed, there was no air conditioning on the plane. The plane was, 120 degrees or something inside of it, Fahrenheit, and so the people who were on the plane, the families that were on the plane, started getting into fights with ICE agents who decided that they were going to block the doors of this airplane and not let anyone off in Brazil, even though they were Brazilian and were slated to end up in Brazil. And that led to the Brazilian federal police coming to try to free the people. And in fact, backing down ICE that was still refusing to let anybody out. And then a Brazilian Air Force plane coming to the place to take the 80 or so people who were on the plane, to safety. And they instantly became like heroes in Brazil for fighting ICE. And they've been on talk shows talking about their degradation. And and the Brazilian government has said that it's going to set up welcome centers for people that are sent back. And it's just not had the effect that it was supposed to have. And then finally, the third military plane had to take a super long route to get to Central America because Mexico is refusing to allow any U.S. military aircraft fly over in Mexican airspace. So all I can say is it's not just here. I don't even know how to describe it. Trump's narcissism, belief that he already is the new Hitler, that he has the right to do whatever he wants in any country of the world, or I don't even know. Because it's so stupid that minimally you would think that somebody who did this would learn from it, but that has not happened with Trump at all. Okay, last point I want to make, which I touched on earlier, was on the necessity of enlisting the support of local, state, national police in falling behind a fascist leader and a fascist government to be able to pull off the kind of genocide that Trump wants to make happen in the United States. And the first thing that I think that makes clear that this is going to be more difficult for Trump than it was for Hitler. When Hitler came to power, there were certainly, especially in Prussia, the Prussian police wanted no part of working with Hitler or for Hitler. And that was one of the things that Hitler had to resolve on his march to becoming the Führer in Germany. But those differences were those splits between Hitler and the Prussian police and other police were taken care of through the use of different types of political and other pressures and winning people over to Hitler's program. When Donald Trump pardoned 1,500 of his hardest, most loyal, fascist, extra legal force by letting the people who did January 6th to be released from prison, he set off a wave of opposition by local police and prosecutors across the country. And in the 2 weeks since Trump did that, the Indiana police have killed one of the protesters that was released, who was an Arizona man. Somebody from Indiana. The Texas state police and local police have started a manhunt for another one of the people who was released by Trump, who bragged about using metal whip and pepper spray on police when they catch this guy. They're going to try to put him in jail for soliciting one or more minors. The prosecution has pledged to try this guy. A woman, one of the few women who was released, has now been taken into custody in St. Louis, where she's doing a 10-year sentence for drunken driving. And there are 5 other January 6th people who have been picked up in Kentucky, in California, in Florida, another person in Texas. So from a lot of the most conservative states that have been places where there's been just outpourings of police love for Donald Trump. But the thing about the police is that from their standpoint, the release of people who were involved in killing and injuring police officers is something that cannot be tolerated as far as the police are concerned, which is why they have already succeeded at killing one person and will soon succeed at putting a couple of people in jail for longer sentences, and the other people, including a couple of people who were picked up on federal gun charges and will be facing prosecution as a result of that, in having now been also charged with state gun violations in local courts, is just the beginning. This is going to keep happening. This is something the police cannot tolerate. They cannot abide by. If they did, then from their standpoint, it would be open, there would be an opening for attacks on police all over the country, and they're not going to let that happen. And similarly, I think people might have seen that yesterday, Donald Trump fired or gave the opportunity to several high-level FBI long-time agents, and now high-ranking FBI people who were told they could quit or they'd be fired. And it's hard to imagine how that is going to consolidate FBI support for Trump. Again, the FBI has its own internal processes. FBI, the FBI has, apart from the directorship of the FBI, always been relatively independent from executive interference. FBI agents are overwhelmingly lawyers and people who are, and that's when the reason they're lawyers is because that makes it a lot easier for them to find ways to arrest people and to interrogate people by listing all of the federal offenses that they're going to be spending the rest of their lives in jail for if they either lie to the FBI or refuse to cooperate. And this is to fire high-ranking FBI agents is just unheard of. And it will not be well received by the FBI. Trump will get far less cooperation by the FBI than he would have if he just left things alone. And all the more so based on the fact that he's putting in a new FBI director, Patel, who's a liar, known liar by the FBI, a first-class Olympic level fool, and it has zero support within the FBI for his appointment. Again, this is not the way, I could say certainly the conventional way to consolidate autocratic power and use the power of the presidency or the chancellorship in Germany to create a fascist regime quickly. This is not a good idea. So, it's since the inauguration, when there was just all these whirlwind of executive orders that have kept on coming, they've proven many are tied up in court. Others were completely unenforceable, like the government cuts that Trump immediately had to rescind. And as time continues, what's clear is that, wow, you know what? This guy is like the emperor that has no clothes. These different threats, these different promises, they are not resulting in what Donald Trump believed he could do. And that means that as the weaknesses of Trump become more and more revealed, the people on our side in the resistance are going to grow in number and in ferocity. So that's all I wanted to say. That was long and I apologize, but I wanted to give a complete picture of what's been going on because it just isn't out there. And then we will be the only people providing this analysis. So thank you, everybody.
My question is, Shanti, if there's any other sentence you can say, I know you said a couple times that Trump's lack of, that he's screwing up on his relationship with the cops and not consolidating a central control over the police that he would need. And I was just trying to think, what is it that Hitler or Mussolini did? Like, what is it, an ideological question? Is it like, how did they do that? If that, anyway, that's it.
Mark, I can say this on Hitler. One of the big differences between Hitler and Donald Trump is that Donald Trump's success at being able to create a fascist state comes out of a war within the American ruling class. And that means that there are the billionaires that support Trump and have believed that it's necessary to have a totalitarian government to be able to compete and beat China as the biggest world power, both as an imperialist power and as a military power. And there are undoubtedly some that disagree with that. But since this is top down, it means that one of the things that Trump lacks that Hitler had was tens of thousands of people that were a part of his mass movement at the grassroots level that had organized into paramilitary organizations. And so in one of the first challenges of Hitler was how to deal with the police in different parts of Germany. And because he had such a large number of people in the streets, on the streets, prepared to act, it was possible for him to be able to just get his his stormtroopers, his paramilitary not forces that were not a part of the state to go into different places and to be able to join the police forces of those states so that it would be possible for him to consolidate power within those police forces and to be able to influence the development of the police. There were some special orders that Hitler was also able to put into effect pretty quickly to the night, the point that he came into power. But just to give a contrast of what Hitler had to wield compared to what Donald Trump had to wield in terms of a popular movement. I mean, his political support, which consisted of about 450,000 members of his paramilitary organization in 1932, rose to 3 million by 1934. That's a huge, 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 huge amount of people to have out on the streets. And he was careful with the police. He waited until, in many cases, it was possible for the Nazis to win control of state governments, to be able to replace police chiefs with Nazi police chiefs. And but it there was definitely a high level of support for Hitler. I'm not trying to say that there wasn't, but you can't, it's hard for me to imagine. I haven't thought about this that much, but how you could have a top down fascist takeover rather than a huge mass movement, because getting votes in an election is a lot of really passive people in order to be able to consolidate quickly the existing police organizations and institutions that exist here.
Join BAM to defeat Donald Trump and build the new mass, independent, militant movement for equality. Visit our website, BAMN.com. On Instagram and TikTok, we are Join BAM. On Twitter, X, we are Follow BAM. Email us at nationalbam@gmail.com or call us at 855-ASK-BAM.